Alright guys, welcome back. And last video we built this little 5.7 here. We set it up for boost with some head studs, gaskets, gapped the rings. And now it's time to put this thing in for hopefully the last time. But we got to pull this thing out. This mock-up motor that's got 2 holes in the block needs to come out, so that thing can go in. And I got to steal the oil pan off of here, and then I got a clutch and flywheel and everything. We're going to put the engine trains together, shove it all in. And then we're going to start laying the Holley on top and getting this thing kind of buttoned up. But first we got to strip the exhaust off and get this motor out of here. Okay, so I went to put the oil pump pickup on here because this was a car motor and I want to swap to a truck pan. And I ran into this issue. There's nothing to bolt this to. I guess the trucks ran a different main bolt with a long stud. So I'm kind of screwed for now. I got to go get one from the dealer. But I'm going to put the oil pan on and we'll throw the motor in the truck because I can do the oil pan after the motor's in the truck. So I'm just going to slap it on there to keep everything cleaned up and then we'll put the clutch on. Alright, got the new flywheel on, pilot bearings in, and it's time for the clutch. And I'm not messing around with it this time. The 51 I had to put 2 clutches in because the first one didn't hold up, and I ended up going to a spec stage 3 plus, which is exactly what I've got here for this thing. Spec stage 3 plus, rated for 850 foot-pounds, and I'm sure at some point we'll probably use all of that rating, but this clutch in the 51 has been awesome. It's super drivable, and it holds. I mean, it broke the trans. So slap this thing on here and then hook it up to the transmission and slap this whole thing in for the last time. Now that the Hemi and trans are in for hopefully the last time, it's time to start laying out the Holley kit. This is a Holley Terminator X, and these are some coil drivers. That's a main power harness. There's the main harness. This looks like injectors and coils, I think, and O2 sensor. So, time to start laying all this stuff out and kind of figure out where everything's going to lay. And it's time to button this thing up. I think I'll start with the wiring, and then we got fuel lines and stuff to do, but we'll get the Holley on here and see what it looks like. Got the Holley harness all laid out on top here. There's still some loose ones, like some input outputs I gotta do. But everything's kind of tidied up. I swapped over to the newer valve covers because that's the style I'm running. I don't want the plug wires running back and forth. So the newer valve covers with the newer coils. They're all on and everything looks pretty good. Everything tucks up pretty nice around here. I'm pretty happy with it out here. And then what I did was I ran all the wires in through the old master cylinder hole for the brakes. So I'll make a little block off plate here, bolt it to these, and that should cover that hole up. And then inside here, I made, behind the dash here, I made a little plate up in there to weld I welded it in to hold the ECU. So the ECU is basically going to sit right behind the gauges back there. And then on either side of it, kind of right here, you can kind of see it a little bit back here. And then on the other side too are the coil drivers. So everything's tucked up in here really nice. It should be nice and protected, and it should work pretty well. And I still got, obviously got a bunch of loose wires and stuff, but that's the main harness I wanted to get run, and that seems like it's going to fit pretty well. I still have to mount the little screen. I'm going to mount that in the corner of the gauges over here. So it's coming along though. So the Holley comes with this little 3.5-inch touchscreen that you can do some tuning on. It's a little difficult, but it does work. It also has a bunch of gauges. And I'm going to run the factory gauges in this thing because I really haven't found anything aftermarket that I like that looks good. So I don't know, maybe I'll swap over to something later, but basically just gonna drop this thing right in here and it'll fit really well, and I'll still have my fuel gauge, and then I'll have a way to make the speedo work, and then I can have all my little gauges over here. but that should be pretty easy. So I think it looks like I'm just gonna have to mount that, maybe drill a little hole in here. I gotta trim this out, because once it's mounted, I won't be able to slide it out. There's an SD card for data logging in there. Now that that's set up, I need to get the speedo to work, and for that, I have this speed box by Speed Hut. And this thing's pretty cool because there's a little connector and then a little antenna here, which that's this. This is a GPS antenna. And then here is actually a speedo cable that comes out. So this box takes the GPS and outputs the speedo cable and actually drives the stock speedometer. And the other cool thing is in here, there's also this blue wire, which is actually a speed output for cruise control, which I'm putting cruise control in this thing because I want it to be really drivable. So I need to get the antenna mounted probably up on the roof, probably sneak out the cargo light hole, ran down, and then I got to mount that box probably up under here somewhere and make sure I can feed the speedometer cable up into the stock speedo. And then I'll have a, looks like a stock speedo, works like it, but it's actually GPS, which is really cool because this thing is way easier. I've got this exact same thing on her Trans Am, and I had a different brand on there, and it did not last. It died, it just burned up internally. I put one of these on it, and it's actually a little bit cheaper than the other brand, and this thing has been amazing. So definitely recommend this. That's why I'm running it again. So I got to find a place to mount that and run some of this wiring. Okay, so while I'm working on this, I also have a cruise control unit that I just mounted here, bolted it up here because they want it far away from the engine. So I have all this wiring that also needs to run inside, so I can tie all that together so that speedometer driver will actually give speed to this, which will make cruise control work. Cable runs over here and it'll hook on here. But I just need all this wiring, got to loom it up, shove it in there, just trying to get all the wiring tidied up together. So got that thing mounted, out of the way, should be safe, no heat, far away from the turbo. Wasn't going to put it over there. That's a bad idea. So got to run all these wires inside now. So then in here, these are the controls, and it's kind of cool. It just, you cut off your turn signal stock, this thing slips over, and then there's some little set screws, and then there's all the cruise control, and it just runs down through and plugs in. So it's kind of nice. It's convenient over here. I use the same setup on her Trans Am. It works really good, so I figured might as well do it again, because like I said, this thing's got to be a good driver. So, and then once I get this all set, the wires are ran down, I've got all this extra I got to tie up, because that's a lot more than I need, but I got plenty of room to hide it. Well, I got pretty much everything buttoned up in here. Here's the speedo driver cable from the speed box. These two, I just need a toggle switch for the two-step, and then these two are for the cruise control that have to go to the brake wires. But other than that, everything's set. So everything's tidied up in here. Should work pretty good. So I got the column out because I needed to put a new turn signal switch in, which the column is over here. So I got brand new turn signal switch, so that should work and cancel. And then on the bottom here, I cut it down. I put this bearing in the end, which fits really nice. And then I welded on this U-joint, which I will weld onto the shaft out under the hood. And that'll all work. So I set the length, and there's the spring here, and the factory springs up here. So everything works really nice, and fitment should work good. And this is nice now that the turn signal actually works again. And that'll work so I can put this thing in for the last time. And then this I'll be able to weld out underneath, but it should work out pretty nicely. And this thing's solid. That sloppy steering that it had is definitely gone. This thing's really tight now. All right, everything's back together. The screen's mounted up there. Gauges are back in. Like I said, I got to get a toggle switch for this, but everything else is done. The cruise control, brake switch, everything. I do need to get a CAN splitter so I can run a screen and a USB, so that's hanging out here. Once that's done, I'll tuck it up in. But cruise control's on, which it actually, the turn signals cancel, so we're all set there. That's good. That's all wrapped up. So the next thing I got to do for wiring is going to be under the hood, because everything inside is good. So I got to clean this up, and what I've got is I've got like boost control wires and dome pressure sensor for that. I've got fan and some other stuff here, but I don't really want to lay that out. I got, power wires coming through up here that I got to run because I got to put the front clip on to do that. So I'm going to wrap this video up here. The inside's pretty much buttoned up. There's one more thing I got to do before I put the seats and everything back in, and that's put a fuel pump in it. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. Is I got a whole fuel system for this thing. I want to plumb out the fuel system. So we got to get up to here. We're going to keep the in-cab fuel tank, and I have a drop-in fuel pump that I'm really hoping I can make work with the stock tank. I'm going to have to cut that tank up. That's going to be sketchy because it's got gas in it. So I'm a little hesitant on that. But next video, we're going to get the exhaust back on. We'll cut in the wastegate, plumb that up. We'll plumb the fuel system in, probably some of the boost control stuff. Like I've already got the fuel pressure regulator mounted and the boost controller. So some of that stuff will get plumbed up. Hopefully get the front clip back on here, because that'll be a big step. So yeah, come back and we'll keep chugging along. Hopefully this thing's going to be running soon.